Time and time again, mainstream media presents only one side of the story, predictably the side that aligns with liberal narratives. Of course, they won't bite the end that feeds them. Last weekend, Pierre Poilievre visited Saguenay for a rally and a snowmobiling event. Following the event, Mr. Poilievre agreed to a brief 5-minute interview with a citizen named Guy Morin.
Je sais bien que moi, je suis un propriétaire d'armes à feu.
Oui.
Fait que bien des gens ont confiance.
Oui.
On veut qu'il se passe quelque chose.
Oui.
Le ban, le gel,
oui.
On n'accepte pas ça, nous autres.
C'est bien.
Puis le C-21, C-71, il faut que ça soit abrogé, absolument.
Je me suis opposé, j'ai voté contre ces lois, je vais abroger ces lois, je vais bannir des criminels. On va mettre les criminels en prison, on va respecter les tireurs sportifs et les chasseurs. On sait que 82% des crimes sont faits avec des armes importées, trafiquées des États-Unis illégalement. Renforçons nos frontières au lieu de mettre monsieur le chasseur dans la prison.
During the interview, Pierre Poilievre reaffirmed his commitment to repealing Bill C-21 and C-71 to protect the rights of lawful firearms owners, enabling them to hunt and participate in shooting sports. Guy Morin, his interviewer, is the president of the collective All Against a Gun Registry in Quebec and the owner of AMG Security. The following Monday, the Canadian Press published an article titled Pierre Poilievre gives an interview to a figurehead of the pro-gun movement. According to Mr. Morin, the title unfairly paints him as an extremist or criminal without offering him the opportunity to respond. The article's main goal seems to demonize firearms, delegitimize Pierre Poilievre's comment on Bill C-21 and C-71, and amplify the supposed importance of these two laws. In reality, C-71 acts as a backdoor registry by requiring the registration of all firearms during transactions, which the RCMP can access with a warrant to track firearms. The implementation of C-71 was a prerequisite for enforcing C-21, which seeks to ban and confiscate lawfully owned firearms from licensed gun owners. Note that neither piece of legislation addresses the problem with illegal firearms traffic across Justin Trudeau's open border, but rather it takes the path of least resistance, attacking a law-abiding firearm-owning community instead of real criminals. And of course, the Liberal Party has even used it in their propaganda promotional social media posts. Today, we have invited Guy Morin to share his side of the story and provide the balance that mainstream media failed to offer.
I am not a criminal. I am just a responsible firearm owner who takes responsibility and says what they have to say. And I'm not a pro-gun person. I'm a guy who can even say I'm pro-control, pro-regulation. I want regulations, control, that are firm and make sense, not something that is useless. From the start, for me, the term pro-gun is mostly, and this came from Poilievre Remembers, who started calling us in this way. There are many firearm owners who thought it was fun, but I think it's like putting us in a box, like domestic terrorists. A bit, I see it like that.
J'ai assez vite, hein? Je pense que j'ai brisé toutes les règles de vitesse.
Je pense que ça allait pas mal vite quand tu l'essayais.
Exactement.
C'est quand même dangereux un petit peu.
La Sûreté du Québec ne m'a pas attrapé.
Non, mais on t'a un passe-droit.
Exactement.
Tu dois te faire bien des affaires parce que tu es bien entouré présentement.
Oui, par du bon monde.
Ben oui.
In the article, they say that Pierre Poilievre, during the video, said he had broken several speed limits, and the provincial police didn't even catch him. Does anyone really think that Poilievre was serious? It was a joke. And again, look, we're making him out to be someone who breaks the rules, etc. But it was simply a joke, because in fact, Pierre Poilievre had a great day. He had been fishing. He had enjoyed it. The interview took place immediately after we completed a portion of the snowmobile ride. He never really drove a snowmobile, so he was over the moon. He was having fun, he was happy, and it showed in the interview. He was really funny. After that, we go further. They write that I'm the main spokesperson for the pro-gun lobby in Quebec, but there is no pro-gun lobby in Quebec. And there's no pro-gun lobby in Canada. In Canada, it's associations of firearm owners, people who mostly just want to be left alone to practice their activities, their sport. We want laws, we want regulations, but we want things that make sense. And what the Liberals have been doing since 2016 is really nonsense. There's nothing working in there.
We also need to mention that most of the crime committed with firearms, the vast majority come from the black market or smuggling.
Well, yes, and they say in the article, and Nathalie Provost says that Poilievre is lying about it, and it's not true. He said 82% of firearms were illegal, but he's talking about Toronto. I will make it even worse because it's more than 90% of firearms all across Canada that come from the United States, which are illegal and are used to commit crimes in Canada. That's really it. And when Nathalie Provost says that Bill C-21, the freeze is to save women's lives, that's complete nonsense. Homicides and suicides by firearms in Canada, with legal firearms, are less than 1% of all homicides and suicides in Canada. And in that less than 1%, the women who are killed by their partners, because it's often their partner or ex-partner with a firearm, it's already not much. It's even less than 1% again. What happens is that the firearms that are used, it's extremely rare that it's semi-automatic weapons that have been banned, or handguns that have been included in the handgun freeze. What's mostly used in the vast majority are standard hunting weapons, a good old 12-gauge for ducks or the old .303 one-shot rifle from Uncle Henry. So the ban and the freeze don't save lives. Anyway, Nathalie Provost told us that with the firearms registry back then, it would save lives. But since 35 years, we're still looking for the person who was saved because there's no proof yet. These are all laws that only attack owners, which ultimately don't save lives because we're only attacking an object. We're not attacking the individuals behind it and the societal issues that are behind it. That's where we have a problem, and we want things to change. We want to go in different directions when we talk about firearm control and regulation.
What do you think is extreme? Firstly, protecting people who legally own firearms. Secondly, what do you think about creating buyback program to purchase firearms from owners who cost millions and in the end, they didn't collect a single one?
Listen, there's nothing extreme about wanting to return these weapons to legal owners because they have always been legal firearms. When we talk about a ban, we're mostly talking about the first ban. Well, they banned everything that was semi-automatic with detachable magazines up until now. But when we talk about the first ban, when they did the first one, they were mostly talking about the AR-15 and those that resemble the AR-15. The reason why they did that is because a guy at Poilievre committed a mass shooting with an AR-15 that he illegally bought in the United States, that he imported illegally, and he wasn't even allowed to own firearms. He had been charged with some small offenses, so he couldn't possess firearms for at least 10 years. All of that was illegal, and the Liberal government's response with Trudeau was to ban the legally owned AR-15s. How would doing that have changed anything in Poilievre? Absolutely nothing. And you know, when we talk about the freeze on handguns, again, they did a freeze on legally owned handguns by legal owners who have all the paperwork. Why? To stop criminals from killing each other in cities with illegal firearms from the United States. What did it change? Absolutely nothing. But that was the Liberal approach. When we talk about buying back guns, It won't happen as far as I'm concerned. But if it really happened, we'd be talking about a complete fiasco, because the only guns people know are the ones that are registered. And currently in Canada, the only guns in what they've banned that are registered are the famous AR-15 and a few other models. So those that aren't registered, well, it's a shame, but they're lost, and no one is ever going to return them. They no longer exist, simply. If the buyback really worked, we're not talking a couple of million, we're talking a couple of billion. It makes no sense, and all that money's wasted. Why? They penalize legal gun owners, Canadians who haven't done anything wrong and aren't part of the gun problem in Canada. The gun problem in Canada is mostly a criminal problem. When we talk about other problems like mass shootings, homicides, suicides by firearm, we're not targeting the right guns. In reality, the most used guns in those crimes are standard hunting rifles, and we don't want to touch them. Why don't we want to touch them? Because we're going after smaller groups like AR-15 owners, owners of restricted firearms, owners of handguns, revolvers. We go after them, who aren't the source of any problem. We take away their guns. If we keep going, it's certain that we'll go after the more categorized hunting guns, which right now they say we're not touching, but that's not entirely true. Slowly, step by step, because Polly remembers, who's the real anti-gun lobby in Canada, hides behind the victims of the Polytechnique tragedy. The goal there is to have no legal firearms left in circulation. That's it. For about 12 or 13 years that I've been involved in this, we've always tried to bring solutions to do something constructive, and we've never been heard because the goal isn't that. The goal is to take away gun ownership in the long term. Plain and simple. When we offer solutions, they're always seen as good solutions, but it's never enough. It's not what they want. In the end, they'll go where they intended, taking away our guns, banning them, implementing restrictions. But once that's done, then they take our proposals and try to implement them. Even if they do take them, what does taking away my guns achieve? It didn't solve anything. They just wanted to do that, period. After that, they'll move on to other things, but the important thing is to eliminate gun ownership in the long term.
Because in the article, they mention Bill 21 and C-71. They say false and misleading statements. Mr. Pierre Poilievre, if he becomes Prime Minister, will protect hunters and sports shooters by eliminating C-21 and C-71. And they say that it was simply a lie. What do you have to say about that?
I think what she talks about, besides removing Bill C-21, is that Bill C-71 itself won't protect hunters. For her, hunters aren't affected. And that's always been the stance that Polly remembers. The Bloc Québécois, the NDP, and the Liberals, that they'll never touch hunters. But that's not true. Hunters are affected. It's just that they're not the majority being targeted because some firearms, semi-automatic firearms, for example, are more modern guns, and there are fewer of them among hunters. However, their popularity was growing because military-type firearms that resemble military guns are often lighter and more comfortable to hold and shoot. Yes, some models used for hunting have been banned. And anyway, a hunting rifle's appearance has nothing to do with its purpose. A hunting rifle, whether semi-automatic, bolt action, or pump action, depends on the cartridge and caliber suited for the animal being hunted. Among the banned semi-automatics, almost half are .22 caliber, which is useless for big game hunting and mainly used for shooting cans or targets. And the famous AR-15s they claim destroy flesh, etc., don't even have a powerful enough caliber for big game hunting. As for hunters, farmers, and others, in the first ban, they prohibited the Ruger Mini 14, the firearm used in the Polytechnique tragedy. But the Ruger Mini 14 is a .223 caliber rifle designed for pest control, like coyotes and groundhogs. It was one of the most popular firearms in Canada, especially among farmers for pest management. Yes, these bans have impacted farmers and hunters.
Do you think Pierre Poilievre is using this issue to gain more seats in the next election?
No, listen, I think Western Canada already gives him enough to win. In Quebec, it's true that we have the Bloc Québécois. For people interested in this topic, they'll vote Conservative, but firearms aren't a primary issue for many people. Yes, firearms can crystallize a certain vote. If someone really cares about this issue, it may sway their decision. But politics isn't just about that. In any case, during the interview he gave me, we talked about firearms for about 40 seconds out of 5 minutes. For the other 4 minutes and 30 seconds, he rambled about everything he's been repeating for weeks, months, almost 2 years. In fact, he was looking for an interview like the one we did, not through traditional media where journalists twist his words, but a conversation as if we were two friends. We laughed, had fun, and it worked. It wasn't just about firearms, and I think if we had only discussed that, people would have been disappointed. We covered a range of topics, and it went well. If there's an article today criticizing this, it's simply because we hit the right spot and it hurt them. There's no other reason.
Of course, the Liberals will do everything in their power to make sure to remove the guns from the law-abiding gun owner. They are not tackling the real issue, that is the illegal gun that been trafficked across our border. We have a petition, and I invite you to sign it at endsofourguns.ca. You can sign it, share it, and make sure that the people who are following the law can actually enjoy their guns.